Democrats are looking to craft the GOP's opposition to a January 6th commission as a way to bolster support from voters ahead of critical midterms.
So members of the GOP have come out against the commission in hopes Republicans can capture their majorities in the House and the Senate. Democratic strategist, council member at large, Montgomery County, Will Jawando, and White House reporter for Real Clear Politics, Phil Weckman, they join us now to discuss. Will, let me start with you. This has been a fascinating topic here on the show, which is that all of national politics seems to center on this January 6th commission. And it just reminds me very much of the original Democratic premise back in 2019 in order to go all in on Russiagate, impeachment, and all of that. And regardless of how you feel about it on the merits, it clearly was a very failed political strategy. The lowest level of Democratic identification in the country, highest level of GOP there in January 2020 during the entire impeachment thing. So what do you make of going all in on this at a time of huge upheaval? And if I were Biden and I were the Dems, I would run on, we gave you money in the middle of a pandemic, and we're going to give you even more during the child tax credit. Oh, and by the way, effectively distributed hundreds of millions of vaccines.
Right. Well, I think you're right in that this is not a major issue for most people. I think most people, if you just ask them during their normal day, was there an attack on the Capitol and was that an attack on democracy and was it wrong? They would say yes. But is their vote going to hinge on whether a commission was put together? I don't know if that's the case. And I think that you're right. Yeah. You know, I'm hoping Democrats run on, we've got shots in arms, money in your bank account, and oh, by the way, a drink in your hand at the restaurant as you've started your job again for many Americans. And we know that's not equally distributed, but that happened on our watch. And and I think that's where you want to run. You know, it might be a fringe issue for some people, but I do not think it's what we need to focus the 22 election on.
Yeah, I mean, the people who would vote based on a commission on January 6th are already going to come out and vote for Democrats. Phil, could you just run down for us the long history of American voters putting their number one concern, the formation of a commission, in terms of their voting patterns?
Yeah, the blue ribbon commissions are what really gets swing voters out there, especially during contentious midterms. I think that you guys make a pretty persuasive case here, especially in comparison to what we saw when it came to allegations of Russian collusion. I don't think this is actually going to tip the dial one way or the other because, you know, Crystal, as you pointed out a second ago, the voters who care a lot about this, the ones who have taken a close look at what happened that morning and that day, they've already made up their minds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who care about this live here in Washington, and that everybody else is just wondering and be like, what are you guys talking about? Will, do you find it frustrating from your perspective, the kind of Washington, like the DC-ification of both coverage and of national politics? Because this is what the White House gets asked about. This is what the White House then has to talk about. And every moment, you know, it's a zero-sum game. Like if you're focused on one thing, and we're all talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene said this about the House's mask mandate. Like, who cares about the House mask mandate? You know, instead of talking about like, well, why is Mitch McConnell, you know, touting stimulus money in his state that he didn't vote for? If I were a Democrat, that's what I'd be talking about all day long.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it is something that's frustrating with the media because, you know, in the Biden administration, unlike the previous administration, is trying to stay on message. They're trying to tout the stimulus. They're trying to talk about infrastructure. They're trying to talk about the things that most Americans are going to care about. But the media does focus on these, you know, this soundbite kind of culture issues, you know, and I will say that there will be some ads cut in swing districts for people who didn't vote for the commission and used in a targeted way to try to get suburban voters. And that may have some sway. But again, this isn't not a national strategy of how we're going to win an election. So I think it's unfortunate that the media focuses on that small kind of sub-campaign strategy as like it's the whole debate. And it is frustrating when most Americans have real issues and they want to move on with their lives and try to get over COVID and get vaccines and do all those things.
Right. All right. I feel like I should play devil's advocate here, Phil. So I think if you were going to make a case for this, what you would say is basically like, look, Democrats are going to run the positive messaging is going to be on vaccines and on money. And the negative messaging is on basically Republicans are extremists. And this is one part of making that case that, like, these people don't reflect your values. They're totally out on some kind of a fringe. And there is some research to support the idea that voters like to vote for whoever is perceived as, like, the more moderate or centrist party. What do you think of that case?
Well, we already know what Republicans would do in response and what they're doing right now. Republicans for the last couple of years have turned martyrdom into currency, and what they'll do is they'll argue, look, the story about the bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads in Russia wasn't true. The conspiracy theories that we heard about Russian collusion, those weren't true. Do you really think that Democrats and the media are going to give us a fair chance here in this Blue Ribbon Commission? Not at all. And so their argument would simply be, look at corrupt Washington, D.C., focusing on something that doesn't actually affect your life. Instead, This is just partisan gamesmanship. I think that's what we'll see from Republicans in response. We're already sort of seeing that from Kevin McCarthy when he says, yeah, I'll testify if called, knowing that this probably isn't going to go anywhere in the Senate, and there likely isn't going to be a commission. But I think that's how Republicans would turn this on its ear, because the bet they're making is the one that's been outlined already, which is that people are more concerned about rising prices at the pump, or their dollar not going as far, instead of what happened that morning.
Yeah, if I was, go ahead, Will, because I was going to say, if I was going to answer my own question, I'd say there's much better ways to paint the Republicans as extremists, which is, look, that, stand for corporate tax cuts. They were adamantly opposed to lifting taxes on the wealthy, adamantly opposed to relief checks. There's a lot better ways to paint them as extremists that relate more directly to people's experience. What were you going to say?
I think you're right. And just to go along with your devil's advocate, I will say, though, that the Democrats have done what they've needed to do to position the argument. They had 35 Republicans supported in the House. There's a set of swing state Republicans that did not. So they have what they need to use that targeted argument. And then the fact that it's just not going to go anywhere in the Senate. But I agree with you. There's much better arguments to make.
Yeah, there's a lot more things that matter to people's lives. And all right, well, we won't waste any more people's times on this. We'll be back with Team Rising right after this.